don't settle for this. We've got a taste of it now. My players have got a taste for it. The club's got a taste for it. Well, let's make sure we're back here again.
Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we return for a very, very special show with a special guest and more. Helping me dissect, break down this edition of Last Word on Spurs, a man that's been with me for the last 7-8 years. He only comes on for the big ones. I've got the wonderful, brilliant Jamie Brown back from the Daily Hotspur. Jay, how are you? Lovely to have you back before we introduce our, of course, very special guest.
Yeah, I mean, all right, to be fair. I mean, obviously, disappointment from Ange. I mean, everyone kind of knows my feelings on Ange. Massive fan of him. And obviously said that the club got a taste for success. And obviously they didn't like that taste. So, obviously gutted to see him move on. I'm sure lots of people disagree, and that's obviously quite all right. But, obviously interested to see what comes next now. I think we all know what is going to come next. But so I'm excited for that as well. But obviously even more excited for the guest we got on tonight.
Of course. Well, helping us understand what does come next is a man that normally always is the man we turn to understand what's coming next. We've got the wonderful, brilliant, exceptional Paul O Keefe back on the show. Paul, love to have you on here. It's fair to say that whenever we bring you on, there's normally some kind of chaos and drama happening at the club. And here we are again. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, doing well. Yeah. I'm
quite
content. Quite content at the moment. Yeah.
Quite content.
Okay. Yeah, well, we've got a trophy, and we've got reasons to be cheerful, despite all the hurrah around Ange and his dismissal and the rest of it. I think Spurs, hopefully it's the beginning of something rather than the end of something.
Yeah. How many times have we said that in the last 10 years? The beginning of something.
It's Tottenham, isn't it? They always drag you in and then spit you out.
Yeah, quite suppose that case always are doing so. Listen, if you're with us for the very, very first time, welcome to Last Word on Spurs. For those that have been here over the last 7-8 years, strap in. We're on another one of those rebuilds, guys, another project. I can't remember the last time we were out of a rebuild or out of a project, but here we are about to strap in and go for another one. Like I say, if you're with us for the very, very first time, you can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on X. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. And we are on Blue Sky too. If you're watching us, of course, on YouTube, if you can please hit that like button, it helps get this out to a worldwide Spurs audience. And of course, also hit that subscribe button for us so you never miss a trick. And I'm sure what's going to be another fascinating week as a Tottenham fan in what we all know is the soap drama, which is Tottenham Hotspur. A lot to get through on this show, so we will go as we mean to do so. Obviously, we'll be discussing the exit of Ange Postecoglou, the events that led up to that exit, and of course, what does come next for Tottenham. And it does look like what does come next for the football club appears to be Thomas Frank from Brentford. We'll be getting into that and what that move could signify for the club, for Frank himself, and of course, what that does mean for Tottenham ahead of what all have hoped and build up to be a very, very busy summer transfer window, where I think it's very well acutely known Tottenham need to do business, are expected to do business, to give whoever that's going to be the squad, if it is Thomas Frank, a good chance of competing on all four fronts. Which I know people laugh when I say about competing on all four fronts, because when have Tottenham ever really competed on all four fronts? But you know what? I am going to hand over the reins to Jamie Brown to start this episode of Last Word on Spurs, which I'm sure is going to be fascinating. Jay, let me hand it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, over the weekend, we finally kind of had a bit of clarity on Ange's future. We had those amazing kind of that few days in between where we had the parade, obviously that night in Bilbao. But as I said, we had those 12 days in between from the parade to the sacking of Ange Postecoglou. So Paul, would just be interested to kind of get maybe a timeline of the thinking behind going from that parade to sacking Ange Postecoglou. And as I said, yeah, just getting an understanding of that timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not personally that bothered about the 12-day thing. I think that there was a lot to get through. There's a lot of contractual stuff that needs to go through. I think Tottenham themselves were taken aback a bit by the response. I think that made Daniel Levy waver slightly, very slightly, but not by much, because previously had been told that he would get the Europa run, and whether they won it or not, he was going. Originally they planned for a joint announcement of the women's coach and the men's coach to go on the same day, which was going to be around Bank Holiday Monday, the 27th, I think it was, or something. But that obviously got sort of kiboshed a little bit because they felt the timing wasn't right then. But from what I understand, that they'd been assessing the situation throughout the season. Those amount of defeats, I mean, just unfortunately, no matter what cup you win, you can't sort of tolerate the 20. They won't tolerate the 22 league defeats, even if the fans would. And they just felt that. And originally, I was told it was going to be we're heading in a new direction. Hence why they wanted to do a double announcement. But I think he's gone as well today, isn't he? The women's coach. So
Robert Villahan, yep.
Yeah, they're both gone. And we thank Ange for his contribution, and obviously winning that trophy was magnificent and a great achievement for him and for the club. But when you look at the overall tenure, and regardless of injuries and everything else, those results just weren't acceptable for the Spurs board. And a lot of fans have the question of how come we can play this and change our style for Europa League, but we can't do it for the league games. And that squad is capable, even if not of winning every game whilst they're trying to compete in the Europa League. They should be at least competing, and they weren't competing. They were getting beat by the likes of Ipswich at home and people like that. So yeah, that was alarming. It was like the boys have been told, well, don't worry about the league because we're going to concentrate solely on the cup. And I don't think that's an attitude that you can have running throughout the club, because what happens if you'd lost that final? All of a sudden you're 17th in the league, and the manager don't give a shit because he's going to get the sack anyway, because he's going to get his compensation of some sort. And then you've left the club with players that are like, hang on a minute, we've ended up 17th in the league, no trophies. What's the point of staying here? I think you're in bigger turmoil. It was a massive gamble, but Ange, what else in a way could he personally do, in the fact that he probably knew he was going to get the sack anyway? So in those last couple of months, I think he just sort of thought, my only chance of sort of redemption is to win that final, and then it's going to look publicly very bad for the club if they get rid of me. My reputation then remains sort of intact, and I get to walk away with my compensation, and I get to walk away almost like the victim. So, for him, the benefit of it was great, but for the club's overall benefit, that's a bit debatable, isn't it?
Fair. I mean, listen, fair point on that, Paul. I mean, look, I don't think I've actually ever seen a split like I've ever seen, even hosting Last Word On Spurs over the last 7-8 years, of those that were for many feeling, and we'll come on to this a bit later in the show, and deserving the right to be given season 3, and those that felt, as you said in your opening there, the 22 league defeats being completely unacceptable to tolerate.
We're all so grateful for winning the trophy. I mean,
of course we are.
That we're never not going to be grateful for that. And
of course,
he deserves his flowers for that. And fantastic achievement, brilliant. But there's a massive caveat: how much damage was being done with the squad and the league, and the whole sort of Tottenham are charging people £2,000-3,000 a year for a season ticket, and turning up on a Saturday and Sunday for a team sort of looking half-arsed and totally disorganised and not really caring, which you can't have that sort of image, can you? Yeah, it's just not. They're not going to. That board won't accept it. They want to. They spent all that money. They put that infrastructure around the manager. There's no excuse for them not to be able to compete in both competitions. Now we can argue, well, the squad isn't strong enough, but from the board's point of view, they'd invested £398 million in Ange Postecoglou. For him to sit in a press conference and say, yeah, the best barometer of how you're progressing as a club is the league. For him then to sit in a press conference and say, well, when the January window shut, I just focused on Europa. So it's a contradiction. And for them, I would imagine the alarm bells were ringing, saying, what you may think that, but to announce it publicly, that just seems like you're just shooting from the hip. And I think it was just too many contradictions, too many defeats, and I just don't see how he had to justify keeping his job other than the Europa League trophy, and I don't think he justified it enough to warrant giving him the Champions League campaign next year, to warrant giving him funds in the summer, and to warrant him to be in charge of that group of players. Now, of course, they will love him. They won the final. Who wouldn't? You know, ultimately, he kept telling them, "You're going to win it. You're going to win it," and they did. So, of course, they're going to love the manager. But it's part of the game, isn't it? You know, they play the game. These players, and they know what to expect. They know football changes very quickly, and that people are very disposable in football. So, going forward, I don't see there being a problem with morale and things like that. Players that want to leave will leave anyway. They'll find a way to get out of a club. They always do. And money will talk as usual in the transfer market anyway. So, yeah, I just didn't see how he could remain as manager. It's just obviously looks really bad publicly when he's just won a trophy.
Can I ask you, Paul, because what's been very interesting is, I mean, look, I thought to say, you've been around the block with regards to Spurs and to sacking and disposing of managers. But what I found really, really intriguing was actually, and people might disagree with this, is the level of detail that Tottenham did go into in terms of the statement they released when sacking Ange. Because, look, firstly on there, and Jamie will come on to this a bit later on, that there was no actual wording as of to date from Daniel Levy about the fact that,
Daniel Levy didn't want Ange as manager, so that's why.
Okay,
it wasn't his pick. It was Scott Munn's pick.
Right. Okay.
So
which maybe explain why.
He had reservations about putting Ange Postecoglou in charge of Tottenham, and he felt that he had to back his new guy and his new regime because they'd obviously built this new infrastructure, and there's no point doing that if you're then going to keep interfering. And he kept being told, "You've got to stop interfering with footballing decisions." So, yeah, I get that. He wasn't keen. He had to be convinced. Obviously, they'd done the deal eventually. So yeah, I think he probably sitting somewhere saying to himself, "I knew I was right all along." But you know, at the end of the day, they've still got a trophy, and he's ended ENIC's trophy drought for them. So he has a reason to be thankful, and just out of sheer courtesy, he should have said something.
I mean, just on that point, if I've got to pick a little bit of that statement up and just get your feelings on this, because I mean, it's a very unique situation for Tottenham to release a statement. They actually bring into that statement statistical data around why they have let go of a manager, which again, I mean, many would find that fascinating. So just to bring out part of that, which I just want to read to you, Paul, here and just get your take on it, because they said, the board unanimously concluded that it is in the best interest of the club for a change to take place following a positive start to the 23-24 Premier League season, when obviously he had those 10 games unbeaten, was top of the Premier League. We recorded 78 points from the last 66 Premier League games. So specific. This culminated in our worst ever Premier League finish last season. At times, they were extenuating circumstances, injuries, and then a decision to prioritise our European campaign, which in itself we know was one that was at odds with presumably Daniel Levy and the higher ups of the club. You can tell us that from your perspective. And, you know, look, whilst winning the Europa League this season ranks as one of the club's greatest moments, we cannot base our decision on emotions aligned to this triumph. It is crucial that we're able to compete on multiple fronts and believe a change of approach will give us the strongest chance for the coming season and beyond. This has been one of the toughest decisions we've ever had to make. What did you make, Paul, for you, just of the level of detail the club did go into? When I bring into the fact there, they actually are using statistical data, which I know a lot of different people have used out there for why there should have been a change of manager pre-winning the final.
Yeah, I think because mainly normally when a manager gets sacked, it's really obvious as to why. Like, it's not necessarily that they've just won a cup, and in Ange's situation, he just won the Europa League, so they had to sort of elaborate more as to the thinking behind it. Whereas normally you'd get a 4 or 5, sentence statement saying we've decided to move on and thank you for your efforts, sort of thing. So yeah, they had to give some detail out because of the timing as to what had just happened. They'd literally just lifted the trophy. I mean, there's the scenes the week before, and you've got the admin of Spurs official, posting every 5 minutes with pictures of Ange and everyone celebrating, and this is our manager, and You know, the I win stuff in my second season, they were happily quoting and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, they look a bit daft in that respect if they then just issued a sort of 2 or 3 line statement saying, you know, basically we fired him and no further comments. So they had to elaborate. But yeah, they did go into quite extensive detail, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one thing that Ange, just to get your opinion on Ange and the possibility of maybe having that third season, obviously, he gave us that amazing moment. And, you know, and then there's obviously, I think there's been a lot of debate this week about, you know, that they clearly showed how important that league position is. But did they see that as more important than winning the trophy? Obviously, we saw Daniel Levy in giving his top 3 moments, didn't decide to list that trophy. When we won the League Cup back in 08. So is there any kind of thought or any doubt in your mind that maybe he should have been given that third season, or just was the league form just simply too unacceptable?
No, for me, there was too many inconsistencies, and there was a lack. I mean, it's only a personal opinion. I mean, everyone berates me for sort of thinking that he should be, you know, and should have been sacked, but. You know, just base it on the whole overall picture. Yeah, we couldn't continue like that. You know, they looked disorganised at times. They looked like the setup was completely wrong. The tactics weren't changing for the league fixtures, and yet in the Europa, we managed to find a way to win a final, which was just basically akin to sort of Jose Mourinho. So you're obviously capable of it. So what I don't understand what the issue was with relenting with your sort of philosophy on football in general in the league. And I just think Spurs felt that they couldn't risk that going forward with Champions League football and with the league campaign. And it's weird because I think, you know, we could have limped to sort of 10th or 12th, and I think then his job would have been safe, to be honest with you. Because they could have just said, yeah, we've had a poor season, but we put that down to the injuries. We've ended up 10th. However, we've won the Europa League. So we feel we've got great foundations to build on. So, you know, in a sort of way, he signed his own death warrant, if you like. So, yeah, they went to the Etihad with Dragusin and Davis as centre backs and won the game comfortably. So the capability was there, but what was probably translating, from my opinion anyway, towards the players, towards the last 3 months of his tenure, was basically, fuck the league. We're not worried about that. You know, you're not going to get punished and dropped if you're not going to perform in the league, James Maddison or whoever you are, you know, because our first 11 will play in that Europa, no matter what, because that's what we're going to try and win. And obviously they did win it, which, you know, is fantastic. But I think that's not the way you can lead a club that believe they're a top 6 team and believe that they're one of the powerhouses in football. Now, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm saying ENIC believe that. And you can't sit there sort of, you know, risking that. That's such high risk strategy, and we know that ENIC are not high risk takers. They want stability. They want top 4, top 6. They want European football. I know they've got that from the trophy win, but I just think for them, you know, thank God for 3 really, really, really bad teams in the Premier League this season. You know, and I think they were just getting a bit tired of some of the sort of excuses and the way that things were going, to be honest with you.
On the point, Paul, you just said there about maybe excuses and, you know, what has led up to the culmination of the campaign itself. Obviously, a lot of information was shared around about the injuries Spurs were sustaining over the last 17, 18 months. And then you've got the situation over prioritising Europe over than the Premier League. I mean, are they the two things? I mean, listen, I can't go through every single factor, but are they two of the main factors? That's why obviously Ange is obviously also no longer here, is by the fact of the injuries and maybe who is responsible for those injuries and the way they came about.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not saying that all Ange Postecoglou's fault, because we knew that Spurs. No, of course not. But I think many knew going into the start of the season that Tottenham, and I think I'm only going to speak for how maybe some fans feel, is that the biggest frustration for many out there is that Tottenham, we all knew, weren't equipped to go and fight on all 4 fronts anyway. So Ange obviously must have felt to himself, well, do you know what? I can make myself a legend at this football club by prioritising,
of course. Yeah, for him, and that's what he's done. He's made it for himself, and that's how you have to be in that situation. He probably, like I say, he probably realised that You know, I'm going to get the bullet here, because you don't. It's not going to come as a shock to him.
No.
He would have known, and he would have got inklings from the communication and the meetings he would have been having, for example. So if he's all of a sudden not being invited to certain recruitment meetings and all that sort of stuff, then obviously, you know, the penny's going to start dropping for him. And I think also in the last month, the way he started to speak, he sort of gave hints, you know, when he mentioned a couple of times that, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to be able to take these players on and all the rest of it. And I think he knew, and I think he just thought, you know what, I need to look out for number one here, and I don't blame him for that. So if I can get that European trophy, I can walk away, and I'll be a legend amongst the fans, and I'll walk into another job, because I'm not going to be that guy that ended up 70th, no trophies, and sort of absolutely fucking kamikaze the league and the club. So for him, it was that gamble was worth taking for him personally. I get that. I do get that totally. But for the club going forward, I think they could have been brave and made a decision before the quarterfinal of the Europa. But I think they sort of said, no, look, let's just let him have Europa League and see where we go. And then obviously if they'd gone out of the Europa in the semis, for example, the decision was made anyway. So yeah, I think he done what he had to do for himself, which is, you know, he's right, really.
Do you think Ange will land another job quite quickly after this?
Yeah. I don't know about quickly, but of course he's going to land a job. He's a charismatic guy. He obviously knows his football. He's been in the game a very long time. There's going to be a club out there that think, well, we'll have some of that. You know, what level, as in terms of whether he gets a Premier League job, I don't know. Whether he decides now that he wants to have a year out or whatever, I don't know. But I think that he will get another job in football. And it's not that he's not a complete ogre, is he? I mean, he's obviously a very charismatic guy. You could probably spend hours in his company and be highly entertained by the guy. But ultimately, I don't want that risk of him picking the 11 every Saturday and picking the taxi every Saturday. It's just a personal thing.
Can I just ask one thing, Paul? I mean, from your understanding, was there any point during the season, even leading up to the final, could he have lost his job at any point, or do you think the club were steadfast behind the fact he was going to get until the end of that season, regardless? Because I know many people felt, you know, at a number of points. I mean, I thought when we were 3-0 down away at Everton, there was a point thinking, how is this guy going to keep his job? You had the Leicester game, of course, as well. I mean, are you actually quite surprised? Because one thing ENIC have been given a lot of stick, and Daniel Levy in particular has been given a lot of stick in the past by not sticking by a manager and sacking them too soon. And look, I mean, I think this has been the impossible scenario for him. The guy went and delivered a European trophy, and it probably made it the most, again, difficult position, which again is why we refer back to getting your view on the statement from the football club. And by the fact you mentioned earlier, it wasn't Daniel Levy's man in terms of Ange Postecoglou. Was there any point you felt during that season he was close to being sacked, or?
Oh, I'm sure that Daniel was getting itchy fingers throughout the season, but I think at the same time, like you said, he's conscious of his reputation in regards to managers. It will be more shit to throw at him. It will be, you're in the quarterfinals of a Europa League, you've sacked another manager before potentially getting to a final, blah blah blah. And I think he, despite what they might say, I think he is aware of public perception, and ultimately, I think that the decision was just taken that, you know, we won't interfere with this Europa League campaign and we'll allow him the season. But I don't think they expected to end up basically nearly enough losing every week in the league, and it got to a point where change was obviously going to come, but they couldn't then risk the Europa because they're all of a sudden they're in the semis and they've got a team that you're really expected to beat. So all of a sudden, you know, time got away from them, if you like.
And I'll let Jamie come in on this point. Go on, Jay. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I feel like I know what your response is going to be to this one. But look, for me personally, I watched back the parade today and just seeing the feeling and everything, kind of the emotion of the fans, the emotion of the players. Do you think in any world it would have been worth maybe, you know, seeing what could have been and maybe sticking with him for a bit and just give him that opportunity and maybe that, you know, going, obviously he spoke in his last press conference about investing in the squad, potentially getting some more experienced players in. Is that a world where, you know, you might have wanted to see what might have happened?
Not for me personally, but that's just a personal opinion. And obviously, People can disagree with that, and that's absolutely fine. Everything about him is high stakes, isn't it? And that's what sort of worried me with regards to what do you do if you start the league campaign next year and you don't get a win in your first 5 games? All of a sudden, your pool of potential managers is smaller because you can't go and take one from another club because they won't let them leave during the season. And how long is enough? Is it 5 games? Is it 10? Is it 15? I just think there's too many uncertainties there. And to give him this summer window, for example, and let's just say, I don't know, top of my head, let's just say they spend £100 million, for example, and then you sack him after 5-6 games. I mean, it looks like you're just totally clueless. The risk for me, like I say, it's only a personal opinion, would have been too high.
Can I ask you, Paul, just one final thing before we are going to move on from Ange Postecoglou? What message does it send out to, I don't know, the outside world and the fact around the matter? The club have plastered around the stadium. The game is about glory, right? And I think when you actually look at Tottenham's, you say, biggest trophy winning managers in terms of what they've achieved, Bill Nicholson, Keith Birkinshaw, and Ange Postecoglou, when they have won their respective trophies at the football club, the big trophies, I don't think we've actually finished higher than 8th when we've won those respective trophies. So when we have that message around the stadium that the game is about glory, I mean, is it about glory? Is it about you've got to have a respectable league position alongside that? Do you think is that the biggest issue? It's the fact that we finished 17th. Right, that is something that you just unfortunately can't overlook, I'm assuming.
I mean, as fans, we have a totally different outlook on football. We just want to win things. Ultimately, if we finish 17th, 15th, 12th, 11th, 5th, and don't win a trophy, we're majorly disappointed. If we finished 6th and without a trophy, we're disappointed. But from the club's perspective, and this is the problem. The owners of football clubs aren't fans. They don't give a shit about fans. We're an inconvenience, in fact, to them. So, for them, it's about the perception of the football club. And Tottenham were considered the 4th worst team in the Premier League. And this is a club that's spent millions and billions of pounds of supporters' money, not their own money. Building the infrastructure for managers to succeed. And no one on that board is going to sit back and go, look, we've invested 400 million quid in this guy, and look where we are. We're regressing. That's the issue as well, is the fact that the football wasn't at the end entertaining. It wasn't the swashbuckling football he'd promised. That disappeared after 10 games. So it wasn't it just that this happened overnight. All of a sudden there was a sea change at Tottenham. There was a steady regression. Now, whether people want to admit that or not is up to them. But if you look at it from their perspective, all they've seen is a decline, and they've seen a Europa League trophy, which I keep saying is fantastic and it's brilliant. But we have to appreciate the context of that as well, in the fact that there's no Champions League dropouts this year. Tottenham and Manchester United went into it as favourites for the competition, and the 16th and the 17th place league position teams got to the final. Now, still, obviously, you need the roll of the ball, you need a bit of luck, you need to get a good draw and all the rest of it. And things went for us. For once, Tottenham got the footballing gods on their side. But you can't rely on that as a business model. And that's how ENIC look at it. They're a business. They're not like you and me. They don't give a shit about that. They want consistent. Yep. They want trophies, and they want the top 4, the top 5, the top 6. That they won't just settle for one, because they think in their minds we've put enough into this to justify that. Like I say, as fans, we think differently. We don't give a shit really if we finish 17th or 5th or 6th, But from a footballing perspective, from the business, they just won't tolerate that.
Listen, we're gonna leave it there on Ange Postecoglou. We're gonna, as I said, on our last show that we did, we're gonna wish Ange the very, very best for the future. I know Jamie was a big fan of Ange Postecoglou, and I said it before on the last show. We wish Ange nothing but the best, because I know I can only speak for me. He gave me one of the, if not the best week of my support in life as a Spurs fan, and for that he should be thanked. And what now happens in the world of Tottenham is who comes next. Obviously, under Daniel Levy, I think we're approaching manager number 14 in 24 years. It makes recruitment look like a calm industry, but we know with Tottenham, they move very fast. We are going to go for our first break of the show. For our listeners on audio, let's take a look at the man in action, potentially, as to who is coming next for Tottenham. Let's bring him in. We'll be back after this very, very short break.
Yes! I like it, Frank. Brilliant. Yes. Rick! That's fine. A little bit higher, V. A little bit higher. So on the outside. Need a bounce. Yes. Okay. Time. Yes. Brilliant, Miles, Brian. Now we're there. Yeah, let's go. Out, Lita. Yes. Better. Time. Now we played a little bit more on the outside. And here where you went down there, where Chris, he just needs to go higher. Okay. So we fill in. Really good. So get those positions and make sure, for example, the outside in the back three, whoever that is, make sure we are high enough so we can take the ball forward. Then we have a back four who's defending. So we can make the breakthrough, we can attack 6 versus 5. If we lose it, we defend 4 versus 5. Love it, Wes! Play! Frankie, perfect position for the bounce, okay? Really, really good.
So there you go. For those that have just seen that, that's Thomas Frank in action. We have got over 10,000 of you that are watching the show live. Thanks as always for all the incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. We urge you, if you can, guys, to keep liking, keep subscribing. Please share this out to a worldwide Spurs audience. And I'm going to steer the show back over to Jamie Brown to discuss who looks like is coming in next to this.
Yeah, look, personally, I'm really excited about this appointment. I've obviously made it very clear. I'm sad to see Ange go, but maybe it's the right decision, and I certainly think we're bringing in a very good coach here in Thomas Frank, as we said. Obviously, he looks like he's going to be the man. Sounds as though it's going to be some sort of fee of around £10 million in compensation with Brentford. Obviously, it doesn't sound like that's kind of been discussed yet. So, Paul, just interested to get your take on when they're kind of hoping to make this appointment by. Is this something that they want to get quickly done? Because as we know, as supporters, we're seeing Man United moving in the market, Manchester City, all our rivals. Do we know kind of a time frame of when they want this done by?
Yeah, I think, well, from what I understand, this week. So that should be wrapped up. He's agreed to become the manager. He's agreed terms. So as far as I'm aware, that's going to happen. I think Spurs, it's just a debate of, because it's Spurs, you always have this sort of nagging doubt that things won't get over the line, but it's all headed in the right direction. It'll be a case of them paying. He has a 10 million release clause. Whether Daniel Levy tries to negotiate that'll be interesting. But yeah, as far as the sort of the conversations with, he's met Daniel Levy twice. The conversations with Thomas Frank, as far as I understand, that's all sorted. There's no issues there. He'll have certain demands, but I don't think they'll be out of reach for the board.
And Paul, only because you told us in the early part of the show that Daniel Levy wasn't the man to now his colours to the mast for Ange Postecoglou. That was very much a Scott Munn appointment. Given that, from what we've heard from the outside, Johan Langer has been a big fan of Thomas Frank. Can you tell us, if Thomas Frank is to become Tottenham's next manager, who has made that decision as far as you are aware?
For Thomas?
For Thomas, if they do succeed in bringing Thomas in.
I was just reading a tweet, sorry. Who made the decision? Yeah, well, Johan obviously knows him well, but Daniel Levy has been quite a fan for a little while, actually. So he was on the list to sort of before, sort of on the same list with Ange. So he's been someone that they've sort of admired for quite a time. So I don't think it was a hard sell to the board, to be fair. I think the board were quite confident that they'd already researched the guy a couple of years back. They'd already sort of done due diligence. So they were quite confident in the sense of he would be in the frame. And obviously now, since subsequently talking to them, talking to him rather, it seems that everything in that respect is tied up. But the club to club stuff, as of 6 o'clock tonight, the club-to-club stuff was not agreed.
So there's still a lot to do on that point, just to be clear. Still a bit to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very fast moving. I mean, in theory, he's got a release clause 10 million, just pay it and it's done. But this is Tottenham, so we always expect the unexpected sort of thing. But yeah, as far as everyone's telling me that the deal should go through and will happen.
I mean, he's obviously done such a great job at Brentford. We've seen so many players leave the door at Brentford there, in terms of, obviously, Christian Eriksen was one of them, obviously going to Manchester United, Saïd Benrahma going to West Ham, Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney, David Raya. I mean, obviously, very different expectations, well, somewhat different expectations between being at Brentford and being at Tottenham. Obviously, he's done very well in the structure of Brentford. Do you think, coming into a club like Spurs and the raised expectations, do you think he's going to be able to succeed at a club like Tottenham?
I think if you look at it from objectively from how ENIC run the football club, ENIC run the football club on basically on a dog's lead. So they have restraints. They have certain parameters that they want to work within. And Thomas Frank has worked within parameters and framework that's very, very similar, but on a slightly lower scale of revenue. So obviously, whereas he could say potentially go and spend 20-30 million pounds on a player, their wage would only be sort of 50,000-60,000 pound at Brentford, and obviously that's going to change at Tottenham. So, but he's obviously also very much akin to the sort of data-led suggestions of players and all that sort of thing. So he's used to working in a framework where it would suit him. So the marriage could actually work between him and Tottenham, because I don't think that he's going to be out there like a Conte demanding you go and sign a centre forward that's on £350,000 a week sort of thing. So in that sense, he's worked within a budget. He's worked within a development of players. I mean, when he went to Brentford, he never actually was supposed to be the manager of Brentford, but he went to Brentford as a sort of bridge between the manager and the B team. So he would integrate the B team players into the first team and help them progress and all that sort of thing. So, and then he obviously was the assistant, and Brentford were so impressed by his work that they asked him to step into the hot seat, and obviously he took them to the Premier League and won the playoffs. So on paper, it certainly should work. I mean, I don't think he's going to be, like I say, a Conte demanding sort of manager. So he's worked within the framework that's very similar to ENIC, in fairness.
I got to say, look, on the last couple of shows I've done on Last Word On Spurs with regards to Frank, I've very much praised him in terms of being an excellent communicator, a man that clearly knows how to adapt, be flexible, and that's one of the things Tottenham have liked about him. And I think, I would urge those out there, if you haven't already, I think there's a really good podcast, high performance podcast with Thomas Frank. I'd suggest, if you haven't already, go and listen to that, go and watch that if you can. There was a great 30-minute or so documentary that was on Sky Sports. They did with a day with Thomas Frank, and I've got to say, it's very hard to not like the guy. I think he's a really likable chap. And I think what also is really intriguing is that when you even watch, I've watched some of the pressers that he's did when Brentford have been beaten, and he's actually very clearly explains the reasons for the defeat. He doesn't look for any kind of way out or any kind of excuse as to why there was a difference of results. I think we're getting a man that very much is kind of straight talking and down the line, which I quite like. And I think getting your head around the last 24, 48 hours, I think many will grow to like him if they haven't already, if he does get appointed the Tottenham boss. But I just wonder, Paul, from what you're describing there, I know a lot of people will maybe feel, is this another puppet for ENIC, by the fact that it's a man that can work within certain means. It may be someone that isn't going to be too demanding in the market to want to sign big, high-profile players. He looks like a very ambitious character as well, though, because he's not really at this moment jumped away from Brentford. He's really, I think, for him, waited for the right time to take that next step to a big club. And Tottenham is a big, big step for him. I think maybe some might have the question marks as to whether Tottenham is too big a step, but you never quite know until he's got that opportunity. And it's very similar, I think, to if you look at the Pochettino appointment. It's someone that has been at a club, has got Premier League experience, hasn't had a huge amount of European experience, but certainly has shown adaptability, flexibility when it comes to getting results, getting the best out of players. What would be your response to that when it comes to fans maybe concerned about him being a puppet for ENIC? If you understand where I'm coming from that perspective.
But then if we was to go out and get someone like a Conte, for example, that's just oil and water, isn't it? So how do we get the balance right of getting someone who is going to be positive and a positive influence on the club, and not 3 months into the job go, well, I need this, and they're holding me back on that, and you got to go into it eyes open, and I just think that it's finding that cap that fits for Spurs. And we can all want and crave the dream managers, the Luis Enrique's and all that. Like, it's fantastic, but these guys come with big demands that ENIC just won't deliver. So we'd only be setting ourselves up for a fall. Ultimately, you have to go into Spurs, whether we like it or not, and overachieve. Simple. That's the only way you'll get recognition from ENIC, is by overachieving. Pochettino did it. He came in, overachieved, built a great squad. Luckily, inherited some really good youth players and Harry Kane, obviously, which was, he was just phenomenal. But you have to overachieve at Tottenham, and ultimately, we can keep doing this dance, but by hiring high-profile managers, or we can just go, you know what, the cap fits with Frank. He's worked in this framework. He's going to give us the stability, and who knows, he could then propel us to the next level. Which, Pochettino took us to the water, but ENIC being the horse wouldn't drink. So, that's not on Pochettino. That's on the club, and they've got to reflect on that themselves.
Just before Jamie comes back in, just Paul, one thing I want to ask you about, because I haven't had a chance to ask you yet. We've obviously seen some quotes from Pochettino over the last 24 hours. I think it's fair to say things aren't going great for him at the US at the moment. He was asked about the feeling around the possibility of the Tottenham job coming back round, maybe, and Pochettino said, I'm going to bring his quotes up here just to get your comments on this, because, again, whenever the Tottenham job becomes available, Pochettino normally got something to say. He said, I think since I left in 2019, my name has been always on the list of rumours. I've seen the rumours, 100 coaches on the list. Don't worry about that. If that happens, you will see. But we cannot talk about this type of thing. Today, it's not realistic. Look where I am. Look where we are. The answer is so clear. From your understanding, has there been anybody else Tottenham have been looking at for this appointment, bar Thomas Frank?
Not really, to be honest. There was a couple of names that agents had thrown around. I know that obviously Marco Silva was linked, but from what I understand, there was an agent trying to muscle in on the deal and sort of push him into Spurs. So it wasn't necessarily coming, and the sort of Marco Silva was more keen to go to Tottenham than Tottenham were keen to take sort of Marco Silva. That was what I was told at the time. That was a few weeks back, that it was being agent driven, but I think they would have considered him. I mean, it would be daft to just have one man and then fail, and then all of a sudden you have to start from scratch. They're not stupid. They would have had contingency plans, and they probably still do. So, until sort of Thomas Frank is signed on the dotted line and done a sort of promotional video, then we still have to sort of wait, But they would have had options, but the name that's just constantly been is Thomas Frank. It's Thomas Frank.
Okay.
It's Thomas Frank. It's Thomas Frank. So it seems that they'd sort of made their mind up a little while back.
And is it key for that, Paul? Because I know there's been lots of Iriola, there's been Glasner being mentioned, there's been Inzaghi, there's been obviously Xavi as well. I suppose he's one of the key also that, and tell me if I'm wrong here, I believe, isn't Frank also a base client? Am I right in saying that, or am I incorrect in saying that?
I'm personally not sure on that one. I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't had that link, but potentially, I'm not sure. I mean, the Ariola stuff was true. That was true. They did heavily sort of research, and I know from a Bournemouth contact that they were aware that Tottenham was sniffing around him. So that was definitely true. But whether they saw Frank as being more experienced in the Premier League, I would suggest that's probably the case. And he's, like I say, Brentford have now done what, four seasons in the Premier League, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
So
4 or 5 seasons,
in terms of sort of Premier League experience, ready made, if you like, to sort of prove that he's been consistent in the league sort of thing. I think Frank is a safer bet, I think.
Just on Frank, I mean, Ricky's given me some slightly worrying stats.
I love the way it's me. These are not my stats. These are genuine, right? We have to be honest.
His stats aren't going to be fantastic, are they? Because they're based at Brentford, and Brentford, you know, as much as we want to sort of big up, you know, that side of things.
He's not been appointed yet. I would have been thrown a hospital ball.
Yeah, it's not going to look good, but then you have to take in the context. And Brentford, since they've been in the Premier League, have, in terms of percentage of wages to turnover, they've actually won the league every season. Which is mental.
Yeah,
like, I know that it's not a real sort of tangible sort of thing to stick your hat on and say, "Oh, well done, you won the financial fucking league." But in terms of competing and be able to stay at that level, and that's all. A club like Brentford, you know, no disrespect to them, but it's about staying in the Premier League.
Of course.
You know, they haven't done the Ipswich, they haven't done the Leeds, the Sheffield United, so they keep yo-yoing backwards and forwards. Burnley's backwards and forwards. Brentford have built stability. They built themselves a new stadium that time as well. So, and they're a brilliantly run club. Everyone there absolutely adores Thomas Frank, and the people there are superb.
This is the thing, isn't it, though, Paul? You know, it goes back to, and I'll let Jamie come back in when he brings out my stats. Apparently, my stats, not Thomas Frank's stats, my stats. I think that's fine, Jay. The thing was, again, you said it there, Paul, so eloquently about the fact that the setup is right, the structure is right at Brentford. We hear the same thing with Brighton as well, don't we? How they have a succession plan. They've got these things behind the scenes. It does feel, with a Tottenham perspective, everything with Tottenham is much more reactive rather than proactive. And I just wonder, how important is that structure going to be around him? You know, by the fact that Johan Langer appears to be someone that is a massive person that would be in his camp, that likes working with him. Of course, you've got Vinay Venkatesham that's just come in, a new CEO. You've got talk about Fabio Paratici coming back to the club. Is this an appointment that you do feel, will he have the right people around him to make it a success? I mean, this is always the key when it comes to any manager at Tottenham, because we've no doubt the manager's a good manager. I mean, we've said this about, you know, the likes of Mourinho, about Conte, even like, you know, some for Nuno as well. The manager's not always the problem. It's what goes around them and what they are actually given in terms of tools to succeed here. That is always the biggest thing, right? And whether they can be successful under those parameters.
But that's why you go for someone that's used to working in that environment, isn't it? He used to working with a technical director, used to working with a head of recruitment, used to working with data boys, used to bringing through youth players, you know. So that's why you have to sort of shop in that field. And for once, Tottenham sort of are doing that. They tried the big sort of name appointments, and they can't work within those parameters. And we can argue the toss over these parameters being right or wrong, but they are what they are, and that's what we got to deal with. That's the reality of the situation. So you need someone who's prepared to have that sort of attitude, that he's prepared to sort of work with other people. And no doubt, I mean, I'm not going to say that Frank's going to be a walkover. He's going to have his own demands. He's going to demand certain positions, and that the club will have to look at that and honour it. But I think that, you know, the infrastructure, everyone's got to be singing off the same hymn sheet. And I think that, you know, some managers that you could have employed, they just wouldn't be. And it's just like with Antonio, you know, we knew from day one that's eventually going to be a car crash, and he'll try and burn the building down. But we knew that anyway, and we knew that. And Daniel Levy took the gamble that maybe he can get us a trophy, and then we can sort of, you know, get rid of him. But it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, do you think it's going to be really important that he makes a quick start to life at Spurs? I mean, obviously his stats here via Ricky. He's not started well at his previous jobs. Bromby went winless in 8. When at Brentford, he went 8 of his first 10 matches were without wins. So do you think Spurs fans are going to have to show a bit of patience with Thomas Frank, because he obviously
and the ownership as well, Jay? Just to be
clear, and as well. Do you think there's going to be a bit?
He's also just coming from the back of a manager that's just won the Europa, obviously Europa League. That's why, again, I had to throw it in there. My stats, by the way, not Opta stats, not anyone else's stats. Apparently, my stats. Thanks, Jay.
Well, he actually quit Bromby because the chairman was going on to a fans forum anonymously and slating him, and he found out.
Wow.
So he resigned from there. So yeah, that was Thomas Frank. Yeah. So I don't think he's going to be necessarily a pushover. I think that he, like I say, he'll have his own demands, and I think as for influence of the likes of Paratici, that's going to be there. Whether it's in an official capacity, I'm told that he can't quite come back officially yet because he's got a lot going on.
Right.
With yet another court case, so he's got his own sort of dealings to sort of get on with. But as usual, he'll be advising Daniel, and Daniel's and him are very close in that respect. But whether he gets an official title, I'm not sure at the moment. That might have to wait a little while. But he's never really gone away. He's always been there in the background. He's always putting suggestions, and like any scout or whatever you want to call him, or advisor, he's put forward recommendations, and then it's up to the club to sort of look at those and study them and put them on the list with the other people that are putting recommendations. But Johan at the moment is sort of very much the man that's leading the recruitment stick anyway.
Yeah, I mean, on just on this point there, he said about the fact of him going to need a decent start at Tottenham faster. I think it kind of links back into, like I said earlier, having those people.
I didn't touch on that, did I? But sorry to interrupt you.
But I feel like a club like Tottenham, I feel like you have to touch on this because you know, who knows? Can he afford to go 8 games without a win?
But what could you do if he did anyway? Because what would you do? Sack him after 8 games? I mean, you couldn't anyway.
But Paul, it is Tottenham.
No, look, you know, I mean, he's going to be working with better players, better environment, better, you know, better setup. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'll probably curse myself here that he won't go first 8 games without a win. But
I think it's really important to bring that up because, you know, we know just, you know, who is under more pressure, Paul?
He might win a trophy in his first game anyway.
I know, this is the thing. We're gonna, you know, he could win the Super Cup in his first game. But who do you think is under more? Who do you think would have been under more pressure, Paul, in season? You know, would Ange have been under more pressure in season 3, or is the new guy under more pressure?
Imagine a bad start for Ange next season, and people saying, "Yeah, see, you should have sacked him in the summer. What the fuck are you doing?" Blah blah blah. Yeah, would have been carnage. And then, as you say, Tottenham are reactive normally. Then Levy would have definitely panicked and would have sacked him after, say, 10, 12 games. And all of a sudden, we're at Christmas, down the bottom half of the table and needing a manager. And like I said earlier, I just think that was a risk that was too much to take. And they feel that the new man can come in and work with the current setup and get us to a sort of more respectable place overall.
Just before Jamie comes back in, Paul, and just ask you about the maybe priority target Spurs will focus on once the new man is installed. Daniel Levy, you know, we've spoke about him obviously throughout this show and the fact that his hands weren't over the Postecoglou appointment, the fact that he does like Thomas Frank, as you touched upon, he's admiring from afar. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation over Daniel Levy's personal future at the football club and what that does look like. We know we've had the appointment that's coming of Peter Charrington, obviously in the last few weeks as well, not saying last few weeks, last few months as a non-exec. We mentioned earlier that Scott Munn is likely to leave the club. Donna Cullen has already departed the football club. There's been speculation over Matthew Collicott's position, whether he's going to remain. Vinay is obviously coming now as a CEO. You've obviously touched upon Paratici at some point. Would like maybe to bring him back to the football club ideally, but he's working on this consultancy basis. Have you heard anything with regards to Daniel Levy at some point in the near future or even distant future, maybe taking a step away from the club or being stepped down?
I mean, I get the same WhatsApps that circulate between the Spurs fans saying we've been sold. We've been sold every week for about 10 years now. So it gets a bit boring, doesn't it? And, you know, Daniel Levy stepping down, that's his baby. You know, if Daniel Levy steps away, it'll be for his own reasons and his own benefit. There'll be something behind it that is advantageous to him because he's a control freak. He likes the whole sort of notoriety of being Daniel Levy. That's what he's famous for, basically. If he walks away from Tottenham, being brutally honest, who gives a shit about him? There's no notoriety. There's no. Tottenham is his total life, isn't it? So yeah, I'd be very surprised. Yes, he probably wants to strip back a bit because he's obviously been at the helm for 25 odd years. He's got other business interests. He's got, stuff going on with his personal life and things like that. So like all of us. So yeah, maybe he wants to strip back slightly and get a new structure involved. He obviously has brought in the guy, which is basically, from what I can see, effectively Donna's replacement. But Donna asked to leave 2 years ago, and she asked to retire, and Daniel kept her at the club, managed to persuade her to stay. So from my understanding, and it may be wrong, but Donna was always leaving anyway. She wanted to retire. So a lot of that has been made out to be, she was pushed. And from what I understand, I don't think that's necessarily true, but that's just the information that I have.
I don't know. I just said I'm going to let Jamie come in. Before we do, Jamie's going to come in after this next break. Finally, it's on Vinay's position. Obviously, Vinay Venkateswaran's come into the club. He's had an interesting first week, it's fair to say. How important, Paul, could that role be with regards to engaging with fans, supporters?
Yeah.
Because I think what we have seen,
That's what he's known for, isn't it?
back end of the season, we did see some nice scenes. I think the club gave a lot of fans a free pint. I think it was before the Bordeaux Glimt game. We saw the scarves that were out. I think for the away leg, I think it was out in Bordeaux. So it feels like there's slowly maybe a connection re-establishing there. How important is it to have somebody that does that? Because I think the one thing that's been very critical of the club in general is that we haven't had that kind of dialogue and that direct communication with somebody that does engage with fans. So how important could that be for Vinay to come in and provide that to us?
Well, that was Donna's job, because her whole career was PR and communications. That was, but unfortunately with us, she wasn't very communicative and wasn't very good with the PR side of the club. So, I from what I can see and what I presume is that he will take a major role in that and take over her responsibilities. So apparently he's really good at it. Very engaging guy. Very good on fan engagement. So, yeah, as far as I understand, that will be part of his role. Yeah.
Jay, I want to bring you back in. Anything else you want to add, just in terms of Frank itself, before we go for this next break, from your perspective?
I think we've all covered on Frank.
We covered on the stats. We covered on the stats, all right.
We covered on the stats. Don't worry. No more Ricky stats coming up.
We just got to wait for Tottenham to fuck it up, and then and I'll go viral for saying that he's agreed to be the manager. But yeah, so.
I'll tell you. Listen, we're going to go for our final break of the show for our listeners on audio. Look, I know many loved Ange for the aura that he showed in the dressing room, of course. Obviously, on Spurs' progression to the Europa League final. Let's take a look as we go into this break of Thomas Frank in action in the dressing room, which I know some people have taken a liking to. Some have called him a PE teacher. Can't win. It's going to be like that. Let's hear from Thomas Frank, and we're going to go for our final break of this show.
Wow. Honestly, wow. It's a good team. They are a good team with good players. And you totally fair, honestly, completely well-deserved win. Well done. Couple of things. 100 Premier League games for Naga. 200 games for Brentford, Ethan Pinnock. Oh, as you know, it's a full squad. We need everyone available, everyone being ready. Fabio, Igor doing very well, just coming in. Damson and Kevin had to be some finisher, hell of a finisher, making the 4-2 goals. So it's done. Very good. Thank you again, Ben. I know you want to play, and I know it's all that top professional. And the way I see all the bits you speak to all the centre backs and all that means the world. Just to let you know, it's not easy. So thank you very much for that. Yeehaw, Yamamoto. What a player, guys. Let's get that music going. Come on.
There you go. Thomas Frank, potentially, we have to use that word with Tottenham, potentially going to be Tottenham Hotspur's next manager. And what does that mean for the rest of the market and how the Spurs' summer will play out? Look, we're joined by co-host alongside me, the wonderful Jamie Brown over at the Daily Hotspur, and we're joined by special guest to the show, only this man can command these kind of numbers. We've got over 15,500 of you that are watching the show live. Again, thank you so much for all your incredible support for Last Word On Spurs. We're joined by the brilliant Paul O Keefe. Paul don't know it yet. We're going to try and grab him a few times over the course of the summer. Don't look too scared, Paul. We are going to try and make it happen. Listen, again, thank you so much for all the incredible support out there for Last Word On Spurs. Please keep liking. Please keep subscribing. And it's time to throw over to Jamie to talk about Jamie's favourite subject in the world, Jason McGovern's most hated subject. It's, of course, the transfer window. Let's hand over to Jay. Over to you, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get started because, as I said, like obviously all our rivals seem to be getting, or certainly had a head start on us so far. But obviously, as we mentioned, been through all the changes in the boardroom, see a new manager as well. So with all these changes, do you think that's going to have some sort of impact on our transfer plans this summer, or not really?
No, not particularly, to be honest. I think the club, like I say, with our setup, the manager sort of gets presented with a list of players that the recruitment team has sort of narrowed down, given the sort of criteria that's required. And like any manager wants to inherit good players, so whoever takes over Tottenham is inheriting a good squad. I think we sort of played down our squad a bit too much. I think if you're a manager coming in and you get the likes of Maddison's son, Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie and Bentancur, and you're going to think, well, I could do something with that lot. I could really do something with them. So I don't think they need. They are short. We can't make any bones about that. They're probably a good sort of half a dozen if you include the sales going out this summer. They'll be about half a dozen short just on pure numbers in terms of, they still need that left-sided centre back, and they still need the centre mid stroke DM, which will be sort of a specialist position which they need to address, which they didn't address with Postecoglou, which was sort of a downfall for him. Unfortunately, he did want a 6, and then they sort of failed in that respect. So he was let down in that end of it. They still wanted a attacking midfielder, potentially, obviously, a right winger. Given what, see, if you get a right winger, you don't have to get a 10 because you can move Kulusevski there. So, but the issue is whether you think that Kulusevski and Maddison is enough to get through all those games, all those campaigns, or whether you feel that there's someone in the youth or the sort of fringes that can back up, or do you go and spend £60 million on Eze? They would like to do that deal. I think that he's a player that most definitely is still on their radar, but it's just the funds, and obviously now that you've got the extra spanner in the works of their ears have been pricked by Thomas Frank with regards to I can't say his name, but is it Mbuemo? Is it
Mbuemo,
yeah.
Mbuemo. Okay.
Mbuemo. Yeah.
So their ears have sort of pricked up with him, and that's something they're looking at currently. Not saying that it's something they press the button on, but I was asked earlier, are the rumours fake that we're not interested, or is it just a sort of bit of spin? But no, if they get Thomas Frank over the line, then that is someone that they would consider. Obviously, from what I understand, it's quite developed with Manchester United, and the wages they're supposedly on offer, they seem astronomical to me. I don't think I necessarily believe them, because he's on like 50k a week at Brentford. So to propel to 250,000 seems a bit of a reach when Ineos have been all year going on about how they're going to cut their cloth and don't give you a sandwich in the canteen. So I don't know how they sort of leap from 50,000 to £250,000 a week, £1 million on a guy that's on 50,000. That doesn't really add up. No footballer goes from 50 to 250. So whether the wages could be in reach for Tottenham, potentially, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely not a fake rumour. There's definitely interest.
I assume as well that that Mbuemo would be an alternative to Eze. I think I know a lot of.
That's how I read it. Because they're not going to go out. Surely Tottenham aren't going to go out and throw 60 million at 2 players. So, like I say, it's a little bit of a sort of spanner in the works. And maybe if they feel they can move and act quickly, then that sort of negates the Eze chase. I don't know, but certainly both players are of interest. But how serious they are, difficult to tell with Spurs, because they say a lot of things and then sort of don't back it up.
And are there any other Brentford players that you might look to bring across? I know Young This is another one, obviously on screen is someone I think obviously someone that we were linked with in January. I think we were linked with we're always linked with everyone anyway. But is he a player that might come on the radar again?
I mean, he could be. He's not one that's been mentioned to me as a strong link. But poor Brentford, we're just going to try and basically might as well just buy the club. He's not one that to me has been strongly sort of suggested.
Paul, James is going to ask you about Son in just a second. I just want to quickly get your view on Ben Davies, who has Tottenham, I think, have exercised that trigger option in his contract that will see Ben here to the summer of 2026. He now is going to be Tottenham's longest serving player, having joined the club from Swansea back in 2014. Just a quick comment on this for you. Do you think they're protecting any kind of fee they could receive from this summer? I think there's been some interest from Wrexham. Or do you think he'll definitely stay with the club as far as you're concerned?
Ben? I mean, it's an obvious deal to do, isn't it? Just trigger the year, because then that gives the club the option. You know, if all of a sudden, you know, someone did come in and bid for him, then they've got a bit of money back. But you know, look, it's been quite. I thought it was quite widely known. I was quite surprised by the reaction on sort of social media to him today. That he's a fantastic club man. He's obviously been there. He's seen God knows how many managers. The poor guy. He knows the club inside out. He does great mentoring with the young players. People will often talk very, very highly of him within club circles. I mean, so much as to say that, you know, they were quite prepared to let him just walk away at one point and let him decide his future. That was last summer. So I think they would have done this decision in collaboration with him. They wouldn't have just sort of triggered it and gone, well, you're staying, don't care what you think. He's massively respected. So in terms of playing, I don't think he'll play a lot, but then he's got his UEFA A license now, so he can coach. So I think it could be a stepping stone for him to sort of end up a coach, whether that be at Tottenham, could likely perhaps go down to the youth levels, because he's obviously, like I say, he knows the club really well. But obviously, you know, people would be concerned that he's going to take a squad place and that they're not going to sort of progress from that era and sort of say, look, enough is enough, sort of thing. But I'm not so sure. I think that it's probably still wise to have him around the building at the moment, especially if we're going to have a transition period now. Yeah, we're gonna have a new guy come in now. Yeah. So you're going to need.
Although we're in transition every 2 years, aren't we, Paul? It's right.
That's football, though, isn't it? Really, to be fair, there's not many clubs now that sort of aren't turning over the managers every 2 years.
I've just forgot what it's like not being in a rebuild or a reset.
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know why they bother giving them 4 or 5 year deals. To be fair, it just doesn't happen, does it? You know, it's very rare. I mean, obviously you've got Arteta at Arsenal. He's been there a while. Klopp was at Liverpool for a while, but then outside of that, you know, I think Eddie Howe's probably the longest serving manager in the Premier League, isn't he?
Well, I think Thomas Frank's third as well. So yeah.
Well, there goes that. If it does happen.
Yeah, if it does happen, yeah.
I have to always caveat that and say that if it does happen, because it's Tottenham.
Yeah, because it's Spurs, yeah.
And Pep, of course, tell us Pep as well. Go on, Jay, back to you.
Obviously, the other guy that got the extension, our captain, Heung-Min Son, it'd be really interesting to get your take on this one, because see, last year was a difficult season for him personally. Still put up incredible numbers. I mean, I think he got 10 goals and 11 assists, which is quite some going for a player who supposedly was out of form. Do you think he's a player that they will keep around for another season? And obviously there was interest from Saudi as well. And obviously we know everything that comes with Sonny as well. Obviously, you know, obviously that whole Asian market as well, where he attracts that. So he's so big for the club. So do you think they're going to keep him around for that as well?
I think that basically, from what I understand, if a big bid came for him, then they would let him sort of decide if he wanted to stay at the club or move on. And I don't think they're particularly in a mad rush to get him out of the building. I don't think that necessarily he is in a mad rush. But if it come to a point where they got a serious bid, and I mean a proper serious bid, and he said, look, I fancy a change. I think now that he's got that trophy, I think the landscape has slightly changed. he could go now and everyone would still consider him a total hero. And I think that sort of, he'd be at peace and everyone would be at peace with it now, to be honest. So I think, but they're not going to just take, say, 10 million, because you keep him around for that. He's worth that all day long, and there's just no point. But if a serious bid came and he felt it was right to sort of engage with that, then maybe the club would deal. But I don't think that they're actively trying to push him out the door, personally.
I have to ask you about Matisse Tell, if you don't mind, Paul, because again, this one is, I know Tell has split the fan base. Who doesn't split this fan base? Let's be real. But he obviously joined the club in the January transfer window. The club, we understand, do have a option to purchase the Frenchman, which is led to believe to be in the region of around the £45 million mark, should they wish to do so. There was no mention over whether Tell will sign permanently or return to parent club Bayern Munich when they released Tottenham the updates of those players that were leaving the club at the time. It's understood that he does like life at Tottenham. Do you see the club trying to renegotiate that buyout clause? What's your gauge on where we stand with Tell at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly privy to the situation. I don't really know much about it. If you think about it logically, they'll probably look at that, and if it's a deal that they can get done, they probably would, because the boy's already sort of settled here, and there does seem to be a talent there that they can sort of unearth. Unless the manager coming in was really against it, I don't see why they wouldn't try and do a deal. But if they can't get the deal done for the value that they see, and there's a potential another player of that sort of price mark, then potentially I suppose they could look to sort of say, well, no, actually we can't do the deal. But maybe they take another year loan, pay a fee, and then that sort of kicks the can up the road for 12 months and see how he develops. Because to invest in sort of 40, 50, whatever it is, 40, 45 million pounds now, if that's going to take out a large chunk of your budget this summer, then I think that perhaps they would try and do another loan. But like I say, I'm not really up to speed on that deal, because no one's mentioned it to me, to be honest.
I mean, one player's future this summer is going to be really interesting is Christian Romero. Obviously, we've not heard his thank you or departing words to Ange yet, which I'm sure we'll get at some point.
Surprising.
I know, and I'm sure it's going to be quite explosive. Obviously, we know his feelings on the board. We've heard that plenty of times. But it's been linked with Atletico Madrid. It did feel as though his future would be quite closely tied to Ange Postecoglou, just based off obviously how strong their relationship was. Do you think he's a player that will remain at Spurs? And if so, do you think he'll continue to give everything like he did towards the end of last season?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, and this is only a personal opinion, I think he probably wants to go, to be fair. I mean, his latest comment was about how bad the weather is, wasn't it? And his family don't like the weather and all this sort of stuff. And I think that now as well, he's got that, not an excuse, but he's got the fact that he's won a trophy for Tottenham. So, he's come here, he's given what he can, and he's delivered something, and he could walk away saying, well, I don't feel guilty for walking away because I won the Europa League for you, sort of thing. And that's just my personal gut. And I'm not sure that he wants to be at the club this summer if he can get away. If the option is there to go to Spain, I think that, and Tottenham were prepared to deal, then reluctantly I think that deal could sort of go through. But it'll all come down to a fee at the end of the day. Daniel Levy isn't going to let him go on the cheap. So ultimately, and it'll be, what do we do with those funds? Do we need those funds to sort of not rebuild, but to sort of put towards our recruitment for this summer? So that it's a difficult one, but I sort of, obviously you'd love to keep him. You'd love to keep world-class players.
Yeah.
I think it's a tricky one, and I'm not 100% buying him saying that he's sort of all in at Spurs, because it doesn't ring true to me. But that's just a gut feeling. That's just opinion, and people will disagree with that, I'm sure. But I think he'd go if he could, to be honest with you.
I mean, he's a fabulous player. The problem has always been is just the fitness and keeping him and Van der Ven fit, isn't it? I mean, that's been the real key. And this might upset some people saying this. I think, we have to have a player that if he's going to stay, he's all in. And it doesn't mean by the time he reached near to an international break that...
Yeah, I mean, he's all in big games, isn't he? Like,
Yes,
in big games,
of course. Yeah.
He's all in, and it's
Yeah.
he was outstanding in the Europa campaign.
It's amazing in the final. Incredible in the final. Incredible.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. They all were. It's replicating that every single week, isn't it? And sometimes we see these lapses where he switches off, but I suppose that's true of any footballer. But yeah, so that's just one to watch. Unfortunately, I can't really offer much on that.
Okay. Listen, just on that point about Romero, if he was to depart, I mean, there's, as I think you know, Paul, from the last time we had you on here for the January window, I know there's a lot of talk around maybe Tottenham trying to maybe get Mark Gahey. I think we spoke about this on the last day of the previous window. Is it a case you think Tottenham, depending on the situation with Romero, may look for a marquee signing? They've been linked earlier on the Sunday to Ivan Ndicka. I know that's one we've heard, me and Jamie, I think we've seen that linked in the past. You've had obviously Luka Vuskovic, who's coming back to the club this summer, who's a very, very bright talent. Do you think they'll see how that plays out with Vuskovic and whether you could put him into the first team? Or do you think the club would ideally, you feel, go back into the market for, I use that term, a marquee centre-back, but an established centre-back? Because to be fair, they've got Danso there as well. I'm just not sure whether you feel Danso is seen as the adequate replacement for Romero if he was to depart, or the club would look for somebody in the ilk of a Romero type caliber player if there is that obtainable player out there for that value.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well known they needed a centre back, whether Romero stays or not. To be fair, they went for Gahey. They definitely did that. That wasn't some spoof line that Spurs put out. They went for him, and they went in at big money for them, which really sort of was surprising. Whether they go back this summer, not so sure, because he's been talking to other clubs now. So I know there's interest from Bayern Munich and there's interest from other clubs. So he will have his pick. I think also Chelsea will try and sniff like they always do. So I think that might be a bit difficult. But yeah, they do want the centre back still. But like you say, if Romero is set on going and that deal looks likely, then all of a sudden you go into a different shopping basket, don't you? Sort of thing. So we couldn't let Romero go without replacing him, obviously, and we'd have to do something in terms of the quality that you're gonna lose. Yeah. So yeah, I think those two are going to be intrinsically linked. Those two situations, to be fair.
I know there's Branthwaite as well, another name that was mentioned. Obviously, good centre back at Everton. So, like you say, we have to see how it plays out. There's obviously a lot of time between now and obviously a new manager coming in and seeing what these players have got to offer. So it will be fascinating. Jay, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of Romero's close friends, Rodrigo Bentancur, he's another player who has been linked with a move away, and obviously Atletico Madrid were a club that were interested as well. There has also been a bit of talk about a new contract as well. What are you kind of expecting for his future? I mean, obviously, you know, he would have wanted a bit of clarification over the manager's future as well. What are we kind of expecting with Bentancur this summer?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, I think he's expected to sign a new contract. I think, you know, Tottenham have sort of stood by him with his troubles as well. I think that he's respected at the club. I can't see that they would want to cash in on him. I think they're already short in that area as it is, without him to sort of create another problem for themselves. So, yeah, I think that he'll probably sign a new deal, to be fair.
There's two winger names that have been linked. I know a lot of people in the comments kind of wanted this name. Xavi Simons, one of them. Tyler Dibling, obviously two younger wingers there. Are those two names that you've heard of? And are there any other maybe names that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, the Dibling interest is true. But it's just about the money. It's just that they want ridiculous amounts. And Spurs aren't going to go there. So that's sort of treading water at the moment. Is a player that they obviously like, one that they're keen on. But again, now this situation has arisen with Brentford. There's possibility of changing tack there and going for a more established player. So I think Spurs would do a deal for any youngster, provided it's not, you know, stupid numbers. Which, considering they went to 40 for Archie, which was, you know, unheard of for them. But I think that's sort of their ceiling. I can't see them going at 70s, 80s, 90 millions to Southampton for Dibling, to be fair.
Paul, obviously, we expect busy transfer window. funnily enough, in Ange's what has turned out to be his final press conference, really kind of spoke about the fact that we need to keep hold of Romero. We need to bring in established players that can push the club on, experienced players. How much do you see that being a priority this window for the club? That look, we've got some tremendous young talent that they've bought, the likes of Lucas Bergvall, Archie Gray. Do you feel for you, will this be a window? I mean, it's hard to know with Tottenham. I don't know how much you can tell us at this stage because, again, we haven't got the manager in there yet. You'd imagine, I mean, I say imagine would have some input. I mean, despite the fact that a lot of managers that come here seem to suggest these are club signings, but how important do you think it will be this window to bring in experienced players that have been there, done it, arguably maybe won it, rather than there being a focus on youth? Do you see this being more of a window of experience, or is this hard to tell at the moment for you?
Yeah, I think if you sort of step back and if you sort of look at what they've done so far, regardless of Ange Postecoglou in terms of recruitment, stage one was to get in young players on long contracts that they could develop, which they've done. So they've done that part. So these players are safe on contracts like Lucas for the next 5-6 years, whatever it is. And Lucas has just extended, hasn't he? So they've done that part of the recruitment side. So now they move on to phase two, which has to be the players with the experience. You can't just keep throwing young kids in and then the next year have another kid who was at the same stage as the other guy the year before. That just wouldn't make logical sense. You need that player who was at year one in year two to start moving on and progressing. And I think that now they'll probably go for sort of the 23 to 27 age bracket. I think now that's what you start to need now. And we consider players, I mean, they're kids, but they're 23 now. If you're in the Premier League and you've been in the Premier League since a youngster, that's an experienced player, isn't it? So, yeah, I think that's the next logical step for Spurs, although we don't always do logic. And I think that I think you'll see that this window. In fairness, I think they will start to go for it. They will obviously keep their eye on these young kids because their investment's not for just today, but they're long-term investments. And if they think that they can nurture someone to sort of double their value over the next 3-4 seasons, then of course that's very attractive to Spurs. And you want to sort of steal a march on people and get these kids in before sort of they do bloom. So. Yeah, but as far as first team ready players go, they know they're 3 or 4 short.
I just, before Jamie does come back in, I just want to ask you, because a lot has been made, and Jamie actually spoke about the fact that as of yet, it may change when this show does drop for listeners on audio. We haven't as of yet had the Romero, I say statement or Romero quote about Ange leaving. And as Jamie said, whenever Romero does seem to talk, normally it's fairly explosive and fairly interesting, whatever comes out of that guy's mouth. It's a shame that we haven't had the chance to hear him speak in more terms of English, because I think if he spoke in English to us, I think it'd be more. I think that's been would be more fascinating. But whenever he does speak, to be fair, Romero, whatever he comes out with is headlines, right? But I mean, there was a lot of talk from the Ange sacking about there being a real reported disappointment in the camp, a lot of anger from the players. I mean, listen, these are the same players that did contribute to 22 defeats. We can't forget that. So I just wonder, and if a dressing room you feel, we're really backing him, where were those performances to back him in the Premier League to some degree? Do you feel there is going to be a real problem getting some of these players back on side, or do you feel with a new manager coming in, Frank is what we've seen, for those out there that know Thomas Frank or can see a lot of the clips from Frank, seems to really build a great bond between the players, and he seems a very likeable coach. Do you have any kind of concern that there is any disharmony in that dressing room at the moment, given Postecoglou leaving the club?
No. Ultimately, of course, they're sad for the guy that won them a trophy, and they've just worked with him for 2 years, and he's been telling them every day how wonderful they are and how they're going to win things. Of course, they're going to be sad for that guy, because at the end of the day, there's a human element to it. I feel sorry for the guy. No one wants to see someone get sacked, ultimately, and that is part of football. These players aren't Tottenham fans. These managers aren't Tottenham fans. It is a job at the end of the day. And next week, it'll be all forgotten about, and they'll go back to training, or next month, whenever it is, and they go on the pre-season tour, and they go, oh, yeah, he's all right, he seems all right. But you'll get managers that clash with players, or like players, have a bond with certain players. You'll get that everywhere, If people were upset with, say, for example, Pochettino did so much for that football club, and the likes of Harry and all that lot. They all stuck around. They, you know, for as long as it took, sort of thing. And Harry saw another 3 or 4 managers after that. Yeah, he stuck around with Nuno. So it's the nature of the business, isn't it? Unfortunately, there's only one guarantee in football as a manager, and that's that you're going to get sacked. It's just what day it is. It's just as simple as that. That's part of the nature of the beast. And yeah, they'll be upset. Yeah, they'll send nice messages because he's just won them a trophy.
Mm.
Some of these players never won a trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brennan Johnson's come from Nottingham Forest as his star buy, and he's won him a trophy. And he's going to love the guy forever. And I don't blame him for that. Why would you blame him for that? But he's not going to then revolt against the club and go, actually, I don't want your £90,000, £100,000 a week because I'm a little bit annoyed that you got rid of the last manager. That just isn't going to happen. Yeah, there might be some players who use it as an excuse. Romero could, if he was tactical, think, oh, actually, I've got an opportunity here. You know, I can publicly say, well, you know, they got rid of the manager and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, of course, some players will use that as a tactical advantage. But deep down, do they really give that much of a toss? I don't think so, to be honest. Yeah, there'll be, like all of us, you're always sad when something ends and you reflect on it and you think, I was pretty shitty. Like Spurs were pretty shitty in the fact that they announced his sacking on the 2-year anniversary. That was brutal. I mean, they surely knew that. I mean, that was pretty brutal. But again, it'll be forgotten about in 6 months' time. So, yeah, I don't see there being the long term. They'll love the new manager, I'm sure, if he's picking them anyway.
That's always the case. I mean, again, there'll be some that'll be happy that he's gone because they weren't being picked. Yeah. That's football, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the world that we all live in. And
yeah,
you know, yeah. The minute that there's a dip in results, all of a sudden players don't like the manager. Yeah, but you're the guys out on the field, you know, and you're not being picked for a reason. So yeah, that's just par for the course, isn't it? And of course they're going to be upset. Of course they're going to be a little bit miffed, you know. But there would have been times in that 2 years where all of them would have fallen out with him at one stage, made up, and that's just part of work life, isn't it? That's just part of daily life, in fairness.
Yeah. Just so before Jamie closes, so as you understand, Paul, as things stand at the moment, we have to say this because it's Tottenham and it's Daniel Levy and it's everyone around the football club in general with Spurs. As we understand it, so we're hopefully get a frank announcement by the end of this week. For listeners on audio, obviously we're bringing this to you on Monday. Obviously, for watching audience, it's still we're a Sunday night here, but as we understand it, hopefully frank by the end of the week. You would think any chance before that, or just we're at that point now?
It's down to club negotiations. Tottenham, as far as I understand, have got all the parameters in place with Thomas Frank.
Right.
He knows what he'll get.
Yep.
And that's all good to go.
Yep.
But it's just a case of Tottenham then, you know, pushing the button with Brentford, paying whatever it is they're going to pay, and go from there. But nothing is ever done until sort of we get the fully coys.
Very true. Paul, one question we obviously love to always finish with, and we always ask our brilliant guests to come on. I'm sure we'll discuss it more throughout the window as well. If you had to kind of predict how many players do you think Spurs might look to bring in this summer in terms, and maybe what kind of positions that those players might be in?
For us to recruit this summer, sorry.
Yeah.
I was reading. How many come in? Oh
yeah.
God.
Sorry.
You know this will be aggregated, yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Or as I now call it, aggravated, because I get aggravated by aggravated. Who just take one line out of context.
Yeah.
Then it's thrown at me for months on end. Yeah, it's difficult. There's too many variables, Jamie. Like there's too many. If this player doesn't leave, you can't bring in this player. Like, for example, if they can't get rid of a Charlison, what do they do for the striker? They can't go and spend 70 odd million on a striker to go up front with Dominic anyway. So Dominic's your number 9. So, you know, what do they do in that department? Are you better off letting Richie go for, say, 25 million and getting in someone else in that respect? I'm not sure you are, to be honest. It's a tricky one. And then you might have, like you say, the sort of shock departure. Maybe Romero goes, and you definitely need to buy a centre back. But in terms of actual numbers, I think that's really hard to predict. I think we're going to need an opinion again, but we're going to need half a dozen if 2 or 3 are going to walk out the door, and we're going to need a goalkeeper, aren't we? Because the old man's gone, and so as the young lad, well, certainly young lad, the other keeper who's been on the books for like 10 years and played about 5 games.
But
so they're going to need a goalkeeper. For certain.
Do you think, Paul, we've had a lot of speculation out there that Tottenham are going to have to, from some quarters, even though they're in the green of PSR, do they still need to sell to buy? I mean, it's crazy me saying about a club that are the ninth richest club in the world, but you do hear these claims they've got to sell to buy. Can you shut it down for us?
What people are talking about there is the sort of the balance sheet, right, and the spare cash, liquid cash. But ENIC could go out and spend £400 million in a window if they really want to, if they put money into the club, but they won't put money into the club. They refuse to put money into the club. In the time that they've owned the club, they promised an injection of 150 million, ended up only putting in 100 and drew the other 50 out. So, and in the time that they actually purchased the club, I think that their overall input is about 140 million or something. So, which over 25 years is peanuts. Tottenham's self-sufficient, will continue to be self-sufficient. Everything is paid for by the name of THFC, and that isn't their money. That's fans' money. So, if you've got 4 million coming in and you spend 3.5, that's your surplus, and that's what they use for their budget, and that's how they operate. So, but if they wanted to, if they had the will, they could absolutely smash the transfer market. But of course, they won't do that because that's ambition. That's putting money in that is, again, risk, and they don't do risk. They just do safe bets, which means basically spending other people's money to get rich. Because essentially, all ENIC have done is get a mortgage against the name of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and they've done it for 25 years.
So the reality is really nothing changes until there's a change.
They spend what they generate, which and that will always be the case. They won't go above and beyond. They've been at this point, a better point previously under Pochettino, when famously we beat Liverpool at Wembley Stadium and everyone was like, this is the time for Tottenham to push the button. And they did. They failed it. They failed everyone at the club. And this ownership have their criteria and their framework, and they will not deviate from it. And
the question is whether someone like Thomas,
and ultimately, like I said earlier, you have to overachieve to get what is considered relative success. What is success? That's your own definition of success. What's success for Thomas Frank in his first season? For me, success would be if he gets through the Champions League in the top 8 spots, which is a big call, obviously. But then Aston Villa got 8th last year.
Yeah.
So we should be on par with those. I'm not saying we are currently, but we should be on par. We should be competing level with Aston Villa. And admittedly, there was a lot of teams that sort of failed in the early group stages, but PSG ended up 15th from winning it or something. But we still got to have that ambition, and we need to go deep in cup competitions, and we need to go as far as we can in the league. No one's expecting Tottenham to win the league next season, of course they aren't. But for a club of that stature and a club of that amount of resources, they have to be top 6, top 4, really.
Yeah.
That's acceptable. That's par. Par for Spurs now is probably 6th to 8th, based on current squads. Par. If you don't hit that, then I think you're failing.
I know this might upset some people because I did say this in a previous show. I think it's very hard for a club that have just finished 17th to bounce right back into the top 4. I just think it's going to be very hard to do that because of the
top 4. That's difficult.
Because the teams you've got now, the likes of Brentford, Brighton, Newcastle, Villa, Chelsea, Everton, I think will come under Moyes next season and spend a bit of money. I think it's going to be very hard. I think there will be a degree of, I know fans hate this word and I hate it because it's driven us mad over the last however many years. When you use that word patience, because we have decided, Paul, to hit the reset button again. I know that is what has frustrated some fans because maybe, as Jamie said earlier, I know it's not for everybody. Some maybe wanted to see a what if for the 3rd season of Ange. But again, because we hit the reset button, you're going to have to give Thomas Frank some time, aren't you? Or whoever that man is going to be. If it isn't Frank, somebody else, they're going to have to get given that time.
But I don't think it's a massive reset, to be fair. I think that you've got players there that have come through, young players that will be better for this experience. Obviously not better for losing 22 games in the season, but there's been some real standouts like Lucas Bergvall. The progression of him, I would actually give Andrew more credit for that than I would most other things, in the fact that Lucas has come through and taken it to like a duck to water. So there's many managers in the Premier League that would kill to have the squad at Tottenham. Yes, obviously they're still short. They need 3, 4, maybe 5 first team ready footballers, but the nucleus is there. I mean, they're not a 17th place squad, are they? You know, and if we can't be aiming for 6th to 8th, then we might as well pack it in, because and that's a low ambition, really. In truth, they've got the best training facilities in the country. They've got the best stadium in the country. They've got everything there to push on. And I don't see it as a massive reset bringing in Thomas Frank. I see it as someone who's going to be tactically aware, who's going to be pragmatic, who works within the infrastructure of a club because he's used to what he's dealt with Brentford, and having to sort of, you know, manipulate the way that he can recruit and take players there. But he's made some astute signings there. And I just think that it's a less, without being too disrespectful, a less kamikaze approach, and steady the ship for 3-6 months. Get these youngsters involved in the first team. Bring on a few senior pros, and I think Tottenham can start to improve quite rapidly. To be fair, I'm quite excited by it, quite confident.
Before JB closes there, Paul, I mean, any idea on the length of contract at this stage with Frank? Is it one to kind of keep an eye on and wait for? I mean, obviously Ange was given 4 years. You know.
Yeah, I'd imagine that would be the same. I mean,
not that you said. Not that it means anything at Tottenham. What does contract mean anymore? But
it doesn't. But you don't go and spend 10 million if that's the case, and give him like a 2-year deal. So, I would imagine it would be. I don't know, but I would imagine it would be sort of 4 or 5 years.
Well, tell you what, he does well to last the 5 years. Given I think the only manager we've extended their contract in the last 10 years was Pochettino. You know, and Ange is the second man. Yeah,
he's only ever given one.
Yeah. Go on, Jay, close us. Anything you want to say from your end to close us on, from your perspective? Frank, are you excited by that appointment?
Yeah, I know. I am for sure. Obviously, I know I made it very clear that I was disappointed about Ange, but I think Thomas Frank is almost a very good fit. I think Paul's exactly right. I think he's a guy who's definitely deserved this opportunity. I know a lot of people are kind of comparing it to the Nuno situation. I don't think it's anything like that. I think he's a guy who is genuinely wanted by this football club. I think he's someone that, as I said, he's totally earned this opportunity. Obviously, you know, I could see him going to other top 6 clubs as well. I think other top 6 clubs would have taken him if they'd have been in the position where they needed a new manager. So I think as well, the big thing is, I think he's a great communicator, and I think that's going to play a big factor. And we've seen it. You know, and that's going to be important. Obviously, he's going to have to get the fans on side straight away, the players as well. So I think he's going to come in and do a really good job. I'm really excited about him. As Paul said, a really great coach. Obviously, someone who's adaptable as well. That's going to be exciting to see. Obviously, loved Ange's football at times. Obviously, not a great deal. Obviously, we didn't see it too often, but under Thomas Frank, I think we're going to see a manager who is a lot more tactically flexible. And that's something I'm excited for. So, I think the new era at Tottenham should be quite exciting. As Paul said, we've got an exciting squad, and I'm sure if you do enough digging, you can see Thomas Frank. He's spoken about this squad plenty of times. I know, very, very full of praise for players like Maddison, Porro. So, I think there's plenty to be excited about.
Yeah, I love the fact. How many times have we said in the last 8 years, get ready for a new era?
But sometimes it's not what you want; it's what you need, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And I think Tottenham and ENIC in particular, and I hate labouring the point, but Tottenham, ENIC run a football club a certain way. So you either get someone in who understands that and is prepared to work in that framework, or you just don't bother. Yeah, because it's just not going to work. So we have to accept that, and whether we like it or not, that's the sort of parameters they work within, and it's finding that guy that can work under those circumstances and excel and overachieve. Ultimately, he would have to overachieve.
Quite interestingly, I've got to just say that Brian Reamer, for those that know of Brian Reamer, he was a former member of Thomas Frank's Joking Star at joking staff, former member of Thomas Frank's coaching staff, and joked if he was ever to move on from Brentford, it would be for Spurs. He said, Tottenham has always been my favourite club. At Brentford, we always joke that if we were going to move on from Brentford, it would be for Tottenham. It's a club that has had some changes over the past season, and there's quite a bit of work ahead of them, but Thomas deserves that chance, and he's done a fantastic job. I'm going to just say, before we do close, I would urge you, if you don't already, for those that may be a little bit on the fence about the potential appointment, for those that are really unsure, I think like I've even expressed in the last few shows, I would urge you, go and listen or watch the High Performance podcast that Thomas Frank was on there. I'd also go and urge you to go and watch the, I think, 30-minute Super Cup documentary that Sky did a day with Thomas Frank. Really, really good, fascinating intel really into what the guy is like as a person. Like Jamie said, the way he does really have a real focus going into every game tactically. We wouldn't like to be here every 2 or 3 years discussing different managers, but this is what Tottenham give us, and as Paul says, this is what the structure they've got to work in. So we shall see. Paul, I want to say a massive, massive thank you for making this work. We've just gone past midnight. Our time is firmly up. Paul, I was going to say, where can everybody find you? But I'm not sure if you want anyone else to find you, do you?
They find me anyway, so yeah, it's fine. Just don't be, as Thomas Frank says, we don't tolerate dickheads. So
love that.
I don't tolerate dickheads on X. So you can come at me all you like, but I'll just laugh and block you. No, it's fine as long as it's not too personal, but or too stupid. But yeah,
well, listen,
you'll find me. You'll find me somewhere on X.
You will. And Paul, is it worth giving a mention? You do a Patreon show, don't you? For those that are interested.
Yes,
where
I
can people
do.
maybe find that? It's because again, it's fascinating. Where can people maybe find that?
Yes, there's an account called the Inside Forward. So basically, we just do it. It's just the four of us. We just do a podcast about the Premier League, and obviously we've got some brilliant people on there. We've got ex-West Ham employee, so he's given us a perspective from West Ham. We've got the Bubble from Everton, and we've got Tina from Arsenal. So that's an interesting dynamic. So yeah, it's worth a listen. I really enjoy doing it. We do it once a week. So yeah. It's more based on the sort of Premier League though, and looking back at results, and this obviously it's going to be quite good for sort of fans of all clubs this summer because it'll be mostly dominated by the transfer window. So and these boys are well tuned in to their clubs. So yeah,
and I would just say on that point because I think it'd be fascinating. There'll be a lot of, I'm sure, stuff with Tottenham in there given what's going to happen throughout the summer. So make sure you check that out. That link will be in our description below to go and check that out. So make sure you do. Paul, we are going to see you across the summer. Maybe for your sins, but we love having you on the show. Not many people can attract the numbers that you do. Over 20,000 have been listening and watching this edition of Last Word on Spurs. So thank you ever so much for all of your incredible support for Tottenham, where we are going to be going again. There'll be a new manager appointed. I know some aren't ready for a change, but ENIC have called it. And we've got to move. This is the way the world works. Paul, thank you so much. Jamie, thank you so much. Thanks. Listen, we have been the Last Word on Spurs. It's going to be a busy next week ahead. We urge you to keep liking, keep subscribing, and we'll be with you when we know more. From us all here, keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on you Spurs.